Hello, creeps. It's me, John Kassir, the voice of the Crypt Keeper, and you're listening to Chronicles from the Crypt.
Hello there, I'm Casualty Chris.
And this is Father Malone.
And we are the hosts of Chronicles from the Crypt, a twice-a-month look at the horror anthology series Tales from the Crypt that aired on HBO from 1989 to 1996.
Now, on each of these episodes, we do 2 episodes of the show, but in between seasons, we tend to do little bonus episodes of some tangentially related and sometimes directly related, though not in this case, Tales Ephemera.
Yeah, so on this episode, we are doing another bonus episode, but unfortunately, this is a little bit of a bittersweet moment. Not only is it technically our final bonus episode, it's also the final Tales from the Crypt film. Unbeknownst to some of you may not even know there was a third Tales from the Crypt. I'm sure Tales from the Crypt fanatics know this film exists, maybe much to their chagrin, even. But on this bonus episode, we're going to be looking at 2002's Ritual.
This child is not going to make it.
You don't want me to repeat my speech on the use of non-FDA approved drugs and disastrous career consequences.
It's a chance I'll have to take.
I realize that I can't practice medicine for the next 2 years, but there is a medical referral service. They're offering an overseas position. The patient lives in Jamaica.
This is Wesley's new doctor.
Welcome to Wonderland, Alice.
Why would my brother drag you all the way out here? You see, what I have, there is nothing that you can do anything about.
What is it that you think you have?
You wouldn't understand.
My brother, he thinks someone is messing with his mind.
It's a sickness of the soul.
It's voodoo. Jamaican version. But don't worry, it only works if you believe it does.
When we were kids, we used to go to these ceremonies up in the hills, do you remember? I started to go back. I wasn't in control anymore.
Why don't you stop going?
Oh, because I can't.
Oh, I could be dead tomorrow. You could be dead tonight.
Going to take away the humanity of the man, the soul.
You sound like you're in love with him. It's like disco. Your head goes to a different place. You're sexy and fun, really, really loose.
Just run. They are more powerful than anything. You run.
Your doctor is dead set on getting you better.
Oh, there are all kinds of ways of getting better.
In the darkest corner of the unknown.
You never told me that a woman is found slashed to ribbons.
I think that I killed those people.
The truth is everything you fear. Jennifer Grey, Craig Sheffer, Daniel LePaine, and Tim Curry.
So the film is directed by Avi Nesher. It is written by Inez Wallace, Kurt Sloan. Oh, Jesus Christ, I'm not even going to try that.
Kurt Shodmak.
Shodmak. I would not have gotten that if I had done it 5 times. Film is directed by Avi Nesher. The screenplay is by Rob Cohen and Avi Nesher. The story is by Inez Wallace. Stars Jennifer Grey, Craig Sheffer, Tim Curry, Ron Taylor. It's got a bunch of folks. Stephen Tobolowsky even shows up. And this film is actually based off of a film of another name from 1943 called I Walked with a Zombie. This is the final HBO television series associated Tales from the Crypt film. It was released in 2002, and then it was actually released in the United States in 2006, which should say something about the quality of the film. And before we get into the movie, Father Malone...
Yes.
What the fuck was that intro?
One of the worst intros I've ever seen, certainly in the Tales from the Crypt canon, the worst.
It is the worst, right? Like there's not even a comparison.
Yeah, I mean, you can point at some episodes of the opening and go, that wasn't very funny, or that wasn't this or that, but there's probably other things that are beneficial. This opening is like panders to all of the worst and is as technically muddle-headed as anything we've had ever. It's awful.
Irie, man, yeah, come to the islands, man. We got a Jamaican, a meat pie, and a jerk of chicken. That is literally the intro.
And leering at bikinis. That's
Look at all the titties. The islands have the boobies. Okay.
I'm surprised his eyes didn't pop out of his head at one point. But that would have been a more advanced puppet, which they clearly were not interested in at this point.
I was about to say, how could the eyes pop out when the puppet was essentially static anyways? So the original Crypt Keeper puppet by Kevin Yeager, while it's not the most technically impressive puppet, it is still an impressive puppet. It's not the most impressive puppet you'll ever see, because it's essentially a stationary puppet with two arms that come through the back and the head moves. I don't know what puppet this was. Well, I'm going to walk that back. I know what puppet this was. It was a fucking travesty. The head doesn't move. The eyes kind of move. The mouth moves about as much as a sock puppet moves. And it looks more like a mummy than the Crypt Keeper has ever looked.
It feels like the production company, years after this movie was actually made, went ahead and put out a call. Does anyone have their own homemade Crypt Keeper puppet? And somebody stepped up.
I think my favorite decision for the puppet was to give him a mustache. Because that's what the Crypt Keeper needs, is a black mustache.
It goes with the dreads.
The deadlocks, you mean?
Ah, the deadlocks.
The beast is yet to come. On top of everything else, the pun game is
very weak. It was never that strong, but man, oh man.
It makes you yearn for the days of the show. And look, here's the thing. I mean, this movie comes out 6 years after the show wraps. Technically a decade after the show wraps, if you're talking in the United States. So,
what we have here is clearly a movie that was being shepherded by Rob Cohen to be a remake of I Walked with a Zombie. It gets made in the worst way possible. Somebody says, what can we do with this? And somebody else says, well, we own the name Tales from the Crypt. Why don't we just slap that on and we can rope in some unsuspecting fans?
Well, and that's the thing. It does feel like it's literally just fucking slapped on there. Like, just whatever movie this is supposed to be, it's not a Tales from the Crypt movie. I mean, let me walk this back. It is a Tales from the Crypt movie in that it's a disappointing movie that doesn't hang together very well, and it feels like a later episode of the show.
Oh, certainly, yeah. I mean, if it bears any resemblance to the TV show as a whole.
I mean, it does kind of feel like Tales from the Crypt.
Yeah, in that anything sort of supernatural or, horror or gore related can be slotted into Tales from the Crypt. I think the series itself has done a good job of saying whatever we decide is Tales from the Crypt is Tales from the Crypt. What with the majority of the stories being based on shock suspense stories or haunt of fear.
Right, because the source material has not ever mattered either. Look, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we have gotten great episodes of the show that have had nothing to do with the Tales from the Crypt comic. But this is far removed from even that. So the plot of the film is you have Jennifer Grey of Dirty Dancing playing a doctor who is fired for overstepping her kind of boundaries and giving someone medicine that's essentially, experimental medicine. And she has to find work for 2 years, so she looks in like a help wanted for doctors, I guess, and finds maybe that's a thing. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. Clearly, I'm on a podcast. She finds a job in Jamaica where a man is looking for someone to take care of his brother who has encephalitis. When she gets down there, she finds out that it may be just more than encephalitis. It might be voodoo, otherwise known as let's just have African-American actors or black actors, because I don't know if some of them are American, black actors just doing typical voodoo shit, and, that's scary. Ooh, voodoo. Like, it panders to the worst of everything we've seen in the show already. There have been so many fucking voodoo episodes, or, like, voodoo tangent, or voodoo close enough, but not voodoo, like, specifically, that this is just like, oh, this shit again? Like, oh, where's this, the James Remar episode again? Or the one where the lady or the guy gets his head cut off and the guy fucks the corpse at the end? Like, Jesus, like, how many more voodoo things do we need to see? Like, it wasn't particularly compelling the first time, and the 9th time, it's definitely not compelling.
Well, I would be ready for a 10th if they actually made it scary, which they have seemed to have forgotten how to do. So
there's not a single scare in this entire film.
No, and I mean, this one, at least you get some time in the setting to sort of absorb what the rituals might be like. But yeah, it's a really lazy sort of shorthand to supernatural. Just like, oh, voodoo, that's mysterious and kind of spooky, so we'll just do that. And I think it can be done. I've seen it done in better movies. Wes Craven had a film in the late 80s called Serpent in the Rainbow with Bill Pullman.
That film's amazing.
Yeah, and it's got some really decent scares in it. So I think you can mine this particular subject matter for terror, but in this case, no.
Well, Serpent in the Rainbow also did something that very few of any film does when it approaches voodoo, which is it actually approaches voodoo in an analytical sense, and it takes the time to explain what voodoo and Obeah actually is, as opposed to just being like, oh, there's snakes and spiders and zombie dust. Like,
you know, the funny thing about that particular movie is it's based on a book, The Serpent in the Rainbow by Wade Davis, who is an ethnobotanist. If you read the book, it is straight ahead 100% factual. Voodoo is involved because he's, researching the culture and how they make zombies, quote unquote. But as far as a free adaptation of a novel, I think Serpent in the Rainbow takes the cake because they fictionalized everything in it. But it's a great movie, so I can't
it's a great book, and it's a great book too. The book is really good. It's a little dry, but again,
it's written by an
ethnobotanist. Yeah, exactly. So I'm giving it a pass, but I really like the book and I really like the movie. It was a weird movie for Wes Craven to approach, given the source material, but it's better than this. I mean, the thing about this is you have good character actors. You have Tim Curry. You have Eric Avari, who dies in the first 5 minutes of the film. Jennifer Grey's not... the film clearly thinks that she's not bad on the eyes, which she's not, because half of the time it feels like she's running around in her underwear. There's nothing wrong with that, having, soft nudity in a film. If you're actually going to do that, the film doesn't pull the trigger on anything. There's no nudity. There is supernatural elements. I'm not saying nudity is required from Tales from the Crypt, but again, it's Tales from the Crypt. I mean,
it's what we expect.
Yeah, that's kind of what it trades in, is nudity, blood, and gore. That's what the show kind of became known for, is nudity, blood, and gore. Sex, gore, and violence. Because a lot of the stories were, much to our chagrin, fucking love triangles. So... yeah. It's weird because you have, like I said, you have good character actors. You have actors putting in the time and effort. I mean, they're not phoning it in.
I think Jennifer Grey actually acquitted herself well. She gave a performance.
Yeah, she's all right.
She leads me to believe she was a better actress than what we were given in the meager showing that she had as far as films go. I do agree with you, though. It feels like, without going the full... I'm going to disrobe completely. It did feel like she herself was like, I will in every scene get as naked as possible. And she looks great.
Without actually getting naked.
Yeah. And I understand the impetus of her doing it, and as a viewer, I appreciate it. But what you're saying is true as well. If you're going to do gore, do gore. If you're going to do, nudity, go for it. We get sort of, they just skimp on everything across the board here.
And again, we're not expecting there to be nudity in anything else. To me, it's just, like you just said, what's the point even? Why have her running around half naked if she's not just going to be naked? Why show rituals if you're not going to show blood and gore? I mean, why make this movie if you're not actually going to commit? Because it's an R-rated film. It is R, period.
Not boundary pushing in any way. Not that I expected it to be, but at the same time, at least give us something to latch on to. If you're going to make an exploitation movie, then, go for it, and I will appreciate it on that level. But if you're trying to make a straight movie with just sort of hints of it the entire time, it lands in a place that I don't care about the film at all on any level. Because I can't get a good horror movie, I can't get a good... voodoo film or remake even, because I Walk with a Zombie, the first one's pretty good. Misfire. But at the same time, always good to see Tim Curry.
It is always good to see Tim Curry, but he's criminally underused in this film.
Yeah.
He's killed off screen, and he doesn't really add anything to the film.
Well, the only thing he does add is the fact that he is murdered gave the film a little bit of stakes, because who wants to see Tim Curry get murdered? Nobody, right?
I mean, the assumption always is that Tim Curry is going to be some sort of villain or villain adjacent in any film that he's in. And in this film, he's villain adjacent. I mean, I think Tim Curry has always excelled when he is playing the villain character, because there's just something about him and his voice that lends itself to playing a villain. And the fact that he's just kind of like he's not even a villain, I guess, in this movie. He is technically doing the villain's bidding, but he also has a conscience.
Yeah, I mean, he's looking out for the lead character in the film, and wants them to succeed. So he's more of a protagonist than antagonist here, and a nice change. So yeah, I mean, that's maybe why I'm singling him out, because as you said, he plays so many villains, and we're so used to that level of diabolical Tim Curry that having him be kind of sweet is a welcome change, and really, as in my case, hit home when he got killed. Like that felt like a reaction in this movie, other than just kind of vomiting.
Yeah, him and Jennifer Grey are like the two roles in the film that I fully bought into. Those people are giving it their all. Everybody else seems to be just kind of either walking in from another movie, or just completely disinterested.
There are some just bad performances in the film. The love interest brother character is really that guy is unappealing.
Yeah, he is. I haven't seen him in anything else. I know that he was in an episode of Black Mirror, but sure, he's an Australian actor. Daniel Payne. I don't know. Like you said, he has no chemistry with Jennifer Grey. She has more chemistry with JB, another character played by another decent character actor, Gabriel Cassius. She has better chemistry with him. She has better chemistry with the woman who ends up being the villain of the film. And,
absolutely.
And to me, it's just like, what? Why is there even a love interest in this movie? So we can have the horrifying ending happen?
Yeah.
Oh, so the film ends.
How do we delicately put this?
Yeah. So the character played by Kristen Wilson is a island native whose mom died. And you find out towards the end of the film, or right at the end of the film, I guess, that the two main characters, the Claiborne brothers, one of which is a villain who's been trying to essentially keep control over his brother so that he can sell everything and move. You find out that that's their half-sister because their dad banged the help in their house.
Yeah. On the plantation.
And so at the end of the film, Jennifer Grey saves Daniel Payne's brother. He's the brother that she was on the island to save. She saves him. The other brother gets killed by JB. And then Jennifer Grey blows zombie dust in Kristen Wilson's face because she turns out to be the main villain because she's wanting to get revenge for her mom who died. And it's, she thinks that she deserves as much of their household as they do, which she's not technically wrong. But again, she's the villain, so her kind of justification gets invalidated as soon as you start trying to turn people into zombies.
It all ends up just being a real estate scam.
Yeah.
And
Lex
it
Luthor
seems
would
to
be
me,
proud.
The characters are like, well, how are you going to lay claim to it if they're both dead? She's like, well, I can prove it, genetically. Like, well, you could have proved it genetically from the get-go, and they would have just given you half. I mean, why this elaborate voodoo?
I don't understand the voodoo at all. I don't understand the point of the voodoo. I don't understand why the voodoo's in this movie other than the fact that it's set in Jamaica. What it feels like is Avi Nesher went, where can I set this movie where we can go on essentially a paid vacation?
Yeah, which is funny because you would think just on the surface of the subject matter, we would be going to Haiti. But who wants to film in Haiti? I'd rather film at Club Med.
But, so the the Kristen Wilson character, whose name is Carol Lamb. Again, most of the characters' names in this film are terrible on top of everything else. She becomes a zombie at the end of the film. Zombie in the sense that she's not even the waking undead. She's just alive, but in a vegetative, zombie-like state. Because there are no actual zombies in this movie.
Right.
By the way. because who gives a shit? At the end of the film, she becomes a zombie. The main character gets married to the brother that she was in Jamaica to save. And the final scene of the film is a close-up of a man's shoes and a wedding dress, and you think, oh, here comes the twist. Because I was expecting a Tales from the Crypt twist. I don't know about you. I was expecting something. It turns out that this, superintendent, this huge, fat man that you see throughout the film who's making advances on a lot of characters in the film, specifically this one character that we're talking about, played by Kristen Wilson, he ends up with her at the end of the film. She's a zombie, and he has her in his hut. And he is going to rape her repeatedly, probably mercilessly, over and over again.
And that is the character's comeuppance.
To quote the internet, that's the magic of rape. I don't even understand. Rape's not a joke, first off. And even if the character's in a vegetative state, even if it's a villain, that's just the most deplorable, bizarre punishment. It jibes with Tales from the Crypt in a way, but that doesn't mean I'm okay with it.
No, and we as an audience are supposed to be cheering that moment because the villain is getting their due. Now, on the surface of it, just the subject and expecting us to cheer is ridiculous. But in addition to that, this superintendent has been a murderous villain for the entire film.
Yeah, he's not a good guy at all.
No, and he gets nothing. I mean, he gets what he always wanted, which is this girl. So it's it's even murkier than the than the comeuppance itself. So I don't know. It's not a good movie to that point, and then suddenly it's much, much worse. Here's what we want to leave you with.
Yeah, that is this movie is climbing up a 100-foot diving board, and then the end of the film is diving into a pool full of shit. Just a big pool full of just the worst diarrhea imaginable. It doesn't make any sense. Oh, and on top of everything else, my favorite thing about this movie is, Father Malone?
Well, what could it be?
There's no wraparound at the end of the film.
Yeah, well, we were spared that, right? That's okay. I didn't need to feel worse about myself.
Both of the other ones had it.
Yeah.
You might want to do it.
Right. Well, as previously stated, this is clearly not that. This is
it's not a Tales from the Crypt film.
This is a cash grab, slap a name on it. This is, we like your movie about comic books, Stephen King and George Romero, but do you mind if we call it The Twilight Zone? That's this level.
Well, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me a lot of the recent stuff that's been going on with J.J. Abrams, where it's oh, I like your script. Let's call it Cloverfield. What? What? No. It's nothing to do with that. Right. Remember the Cloverfield paradox? Yeah, me either. That's what this reminds me of, where it's like you said, just slap the IP on and move on.
Yeah.
And on top of everything else, I'd like to point out that the title of this should have been I Walked with a Zombie.
It absolutely should have been. Why not? Other than they're trying to distance themselves and convince us that it's not that.
Even though it is.
Yeah.
Even though I believe story credit still went to the original script.
Well, it has to. It is.
By Inez Wallace. So,
yeah.
Long lost cousin of Mike Wallace. Or you, Father Malone.
Yeah. Distant cousin.
It just smacks of cash grab. And look, you and I both know that there have been cash grabs that are good. This is not one of them. And on top of everything else, the director, Avi Nesher, I have seen nothing else of what he's worked on. He seems to have barely worked in English language cinema. He worked in English language cinema for about a decade and then went back to making films in Israel. So
I wish him well. Yeah.
Because stay away from Tales from the Crypt, because he doesn't bring anything as a director to this film. It feels like the film directed itself,
and poorly at that.
Yeah.
Nothing really to recommend this. I mean, some good performances, but you'd be better off spending your time virtually doing anything else.
Well, and the funny thing is, when it was released overseas, it didn't even have
a theatrical release. I find that hard to believe.
Yeah. It was not. It had none of the Tales from the Crypt branding on it.
Oh, I'm sure. Because what is that to them?
Well, again, that's the question, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Probably nothing. I wasn't coherent as a adult and old enough to know what waves Tales from the Crypt was making when it was a show. When it was a show, it was probably making waves. But
it certainly
a decade later, 6 to 10 years later, like, who cares? Nobody even cares about it now. Like, we care about it as fans of the show, but like, Tales from the Crypt is not exactly in the public conscious. I mean, which is a damn shame, because there are essentially shows out there that are aping Tales from the Crypt. You know, anthology shows exist now because of shows like Twilight Zone, because of shows like Tales from the Crypt. They've had their resurgence because they are a popular form of storytelling, similar to novellas. I mean, the novella is very similar to the television anthology series in the form of Tales from the Crypt or Twilight Zone, because it's a contained short story. And it's a breeding ground for exciting ideas. This is not one of them.
No.
This is like, the fact that we watched this movie felt like we did it as completionists, not because we wanted to.
Certainly.
I mean, if you go and look at the box art for this film, it looks atrocious. That should be your first warning.
Every expense was spared.
Boy, wasn't it? And the fact that this is associated with Demon Knight and Bordello of Blood makes those films look like Blade Runner and Alien. Like two of the greatest genre films of all time. That's how good those films look in comparison to this.
Yeah, if there's anything to recommend this, it would have to be that it makes previous efforts seem startlingly good.
Is this, I mean, up until this point, we haven't gotten to season 7 yet, which is kind of notorious. Is this the worst Tales from the Crypt thing we've seen?
I'll say yes, just because of the length. Even with a really bad episode, it in 22, 23 minutes, it'll be done. This just kept going.
And the funny thing is, when I was watching it with my wife last night, she was like, when is this movie going to end? And I was like, I don't know. It feels like it had been on for forever.
And it's not that long.
No, it's an hour and a half.
Yeah, but man, oh man, felt like 3 to 4 hours.
I mean, if you have some sort of sick completionist compulsion like we do, and the fact that we're bringing you content by watching it, by all means, $4 on Amazon. But I can tell you that those $4 would be better suited sitting in your pocket. Just go and give $4 to someone who needs it more, because the people who made this film don't need it.
No. And I think that's a pretty good summation. Don't waste anything on this.
No, and I can't even believe that Rob Cohen was involved with this film.
Well, I'm sure it was a little different when he was planning to do it, you know.
I don't know. I couldn't find the script, so I don't know. I mean, this is the same person who brought us The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor.
That is true.
And The Skulls. Oh, and he's also the reason we have The Fast and the Furious. So
that's right. Don't forget Triple X. That's
right. Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Dragonheart.
And the Hurricane Heist.
Oh man, what a good
remember that
movie.
The classic film classic, and The Rat Pack, a film where Ray Liotta plays Frank Sinatra.
Oh man, he made that. That was terrible.
Yeah, I know it was terrible. It was real bad. It was like astoundingly bad. It's almost as bad as this. But like you said, I think that if this movie had just been, you know, what it was up until the ending, it's whatever. It's not good. But the fact that ending does what that ending does, it feels like
Gleefully.
a step. It's a step too far without even realizing that that's a problem. Like they don't even care.
And neither do we.
No, not in the slightest. It's, again, this is genuinely like I said, I think I'm with you. I think this is genuinely the worst thing I've ever seen regarding Tales from the Crypt. And on top of everything else, the only gore is in the first 5 minutes of the movie, which is actually pretty good gore.
It was a good moment at there.
Eric Avari melting was always great. I mean, Eric Avari is a great character actor. Oh, and Jackie DiNardo from It's Always Sunny is in this episode, and she gets murdered. So there you go. There's...
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say skip hard.
Don't watch this movie. There are so many better things that we've watched. Monster Club, those two Tales from the Crypt movies, the original ones, before they were even part of a series.
Yeah.
But this makes Bordello of Blood, I mean, a film that neither one of us really liked. This makes Bordello of Blood look like the greatest film ever made.
Yeah, I would. If you put the two movies in front of me, I'm definitely going to choose Demon Knight.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think, since this is the final Tales from the Crypt movie we're talking about, what is your ranking for those 3 Tales from the Crypt movies?
I think it's just the order they came out.
I think it's just Demon Knight and Bordello of Blood, and let's just pretend that this isn't one anyways, because they didn't. So
the law of diminishing returns in action, the Tales from the Crypt film franchise.
It's true. And we did get to find out that John Kassir, as much as we love him, cannot do a Jamaican accent.
No, not as the Crypt Keeper.
No, I'm sure he can do one without it, but boy. So yeah, so that's it for Tales from the Crypt movies, and I couldn't be happier. Because if there was something else to come out past this, it probably had a very high likelihood of being directed by like Uwe Boll.
Yeah, probably. So let's be happy with what we've got and say goodbye to this entirely.
Yeah. And it's, you know what the biggest shame is? It was distributed by RKO.
Well, they own the original movie. That's the,
I know. You see that name and you're just like, RKO Pictures, like the history behind that.
I know, it gives you a little bit of hope. I haven't seen this logo in decades. This is going to be interesting. No.
Nope.
Sorry.
Wrong answer. So yeah, so that's our review of Ritual. Not good. Don't waste your time. I don't know, it's to me, I don't know about you, but to me it is kind of a bummer because I don't know if we're ever going to see anything else Tales from the Crypt.
Oh, we will eventually. Once they sort out all those rights, someone will go full steam again, but this was not the way to reignite interest in it.
And neither is pairing M. Night Shyamalan. Unless you want it to be bad, which, I mean, hey, look at Ritual. Maybe that's what they're going for. It's so bad, it's bad.
It was a stepping stone.
So, on the next episode of Chronicles from the Crypt, we're going to be taking a look at the first 2 episodes of Season 7, otherwise known as the British season, because the entire season of the show was filmed overseas, in England. I have not seen it enough to remember it, but I know that we're going to be seeing some familiar faces like Daniel Craig, Ewan McGregor, I think.
Yeah. That's the only one I've seen.
Steve Coogan, and then Bobcat Goldthwait doing a 3 Little Pigs story.
Yeah, that probably meant for season 6, and it just took them too long to animate.
Yeah. So we'll be looking at the first 2 episodes of season 7 on the next episode. Those episodes are Fatal Caper and Last Respects. So until then, what corner of the crypt can people find you in, Father Malone?
Well, I would encourage everyone to go over to my website, fathermalone.com, to check out my new podcast, Dark Destinations. It's a travelogue to fictional towns. You can check out my YouTube channel, Ot5 Films. I got a lot of content on there. You can also hear me over on Dreams for Sale, the Twilight Zone 85 podcast, which I do with Chris and our good friend Mike White.
As for me, you can find me on Twitter at Casualty_Chris. I do a bunch of podcasts. Father Malone mentioned some of them. Scary Stories We Tell is another one that I do. That is true crime, paranormal, and the supernatural, along with a little bit of the horror community thrown in for good measure. Because let's face it, if you're a horror fan, it kind of just permeates everything anyways. You can find us on the internet at chroniclesftc.com or over at Twitter at ChroniclesFTC. Big thanks as always to John Kassir for the intro to the podcast. And we'll catch you on the next episode.